Hey there, I'm Danny Trester from Trester Tailor in Rochester, Minnesota. This is Tailor It Yourself. In this video, I'm going to show you how to hem a pair of jeans or their casual style pant. This technique will differ from a regular rolled hem in that instead of sewing it from the inside, we'll be sewing it from the outside. This will help us to better customize our thread color and width, and will help to replicate any stitching that might be a little bit tricky to match. If you're interested in doing a hem this way, I recommend practicing how to do a regular rolled hem first. It can be a little bit tricky to do it this way, so knowing how a regular hem goes together will be really helpful to know before you attempt to do this. To stitch a hem from the top down, you need a couple of things. You'll need a scissors, a ruler, and some tailor's chalk, and 2 or more thread colors that you will blend together. Some other larger items that you're going to need are an ironing board, an iron with some steam, and a sewing machine. What I mean by a top-down hem is when you do a normal rolled hem, you roll it on the inside and stitch it so that when you stitch it, the top thread is only visible on the inside and the bottom thread is visible on the bottom. When you do it from the top down, you're stitching it so that the top thread is visible on the outside and the bobbin thread is the one that's visible on the inside. This is advantageous because when you stitch from the top down, you're able to greater manipulate the thread color than you would if you sew it the regular way. From the top down, you're able to thread several colors through the machine at the same time. So if you have a unique thread color that you can't quite find a match for in top stitching thread, you can blend together several regular weight threads to get that unique color that you're looking for and help get a better match to what's on the rest of the pants. But you don't have to do it this way, but if you're really trying to match the hem and the stitching to what's on the rest of the pant and make everything match, this is a really good way to blend that together. This is going to be the same marking process as our normal hem. So we have our 2 markings that will line up and lay flat on the table. And then we will take our ruler and chalk and we'll kind of make sure that our legs are parallel and lay our ruler down and mark on the top, in the middle, and the bottom. And the hem width on here is about a 1/2 inch, so I'm going to make a mark for our hem width on the top and the bottom. And then I'm going to mark another 1/2 inch because that's going to be the amount that will roll into that so that we can encase the raw edge. So now that we've got that marked and we've got even lines all the way around, we'll go ahead and cut our excess off. The reason I'm doing the top-down method on this pair of pants is that this gray thread is a little bit unique and I don't have a top stitching thread that matches it. So I'm going to take 2 regular weight gray threads and combine them to make a color that will blend in with the rest of the garment. Now that we have that measured and cut off, we'll set up our machine with our multiple threads and sew that from the top down. When you get to your machine, you're first going to want to set up your thread. Like I said, I've got 2 regular weight threads that I'm going to be running through the machine at the same time. When I'm threading my machine with multiple threads, what I like to do is attach it to the thread that's already on the machine. That way you can just tie it and pull it through without having to thread it, which is especially helpful when you have multiple threads. So when we do this, we will tie it to the existing thread that's on there. Once those are tied together, then you just take the thread and pull it through the rest of the machine. And now you'll have 2 threads that are on the machine at the same time. Most likely you're using a home sewing machine to do this, which is just fine, but there's only going to be room for 1 spool on the machine. So what you can do is get a thread spool holder or cone holder from Joann Fabrics or Amazon. And this is going to help to keep the spool upright so that the thread can spool off of it evenly, and then you won't have any tension problems. Once you have your thread set up, we'll be turning our pants inside out so that the top thread will be visible on the outside. And I'm making my stitch length as long as it'll go on my machine, which is 4 millimeters. If your machine can do an extra long basting stitch, I wouldn't recommend going that long, but maybe you could sew on a piece of scrap fabric and try to match what's on the rest of the pants. So as with hems, we are going to start on our inseam. That way our start and stop point is on the inside of the pant and won't be as visible. And the top stitch seam on this pair of pants is the one that's the inseam. So we can remember that. Now that we've got it turned inside out, sometimes it's a little harder to keep track of where you are. So the one that has this row of top stitching on it is going to be the one that we'll remember as our inseam. So as the same with a normal hem, we have the 2 lines. One is to fold to encase the raw edge, and the second one is to fold that into to get our finished hem length. So we'll fold that on the first line and again fold it to that second line. And we want to try to make sure that our side seam here is lined up with our seam here, and this is going to be kind of important to get from the start because we're not going to be able to see what's going on underneath this. So we want to make sure that we get that lined up and then flip it over, and then you'll stick that under your machine. And then just sink your needle to secure that while we fidget around a little bit. So my machine has a marking on the needle plate that tells me where a 1/2 inch is, and I'm going to use that as my guide to know where to go. If you don't have markings on your machine, you can take a small piece of tape and put that at the 1/2 inch mark. You can measure from the needle to the edge of where 1/2 inch is, and that'll also be a reminder where the 1/2 inch mark is. So as we sew this, we're going to be rolling this underneath. So we're not going to be able to really see what's going on under there. So we're really going to do this by feeling. So you'll need to use your fingertips to kind of see, how much is under there, if it's folded correctly. And it might take some practice to totally get the feel for this. You may have to do the hem and then redo it. But if you follow your lines that you've made, it should be pretty straightforward. So underneath, we're going to fold to that first line to encase that raw edge. And then we're going to fold to our second finished hem line. And if we feel underneath here, we can feel that the edge is right there. It's about a 1/2 inch. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that and feel for it as we stitch. So we'll just go around. And you're going to want to do this slowly because you kind of want to adjust things as you go. And again, fold underneath. Fold to that one line, and then we'll fold to our finished hem line. And then lay that flat. And then feel for the seam there. And I can feel that it's right there, so we're good on where the edge is. And as we approach this side seam, we want to make sure that we line this up so we have the seams from the allowance lining up with the seam on the pants. So if we get this crooked, there's going to be a twist in the hem. Some people want that, some people don't, but it'll kind of get funky over time if you have a twist in there. So I like to line that up and make sure that's straight there. So we'll lay that down and then feel again. Got a 1/2 inch in there. And then we're just, again, folding the 2 lines and making sure it's a 1/2 inch, laying it flat, feeling for that 1/2 inch, and then stitching. Again, we're making sure it's folded, laying it down, feeling for the 1/2 inch. And as we approach the end, this has already been folded, so it's going to be a little easier. You kind of can just run into that. But again, just make sure you feel for the 1/2 inch that it's folded properly. And I'm just gonna walk it over the seams because it's a little thick there. And back. And if we fold that to the outside, we can see that's nice and straight. It's a 1/2 inch. And as you can see, this matches pretty closely to the stitch weight and the stitch length. So that'll blend in really nicely with the rest of the pant. And now we'll do the same for the other leg. And again, starting on our top stitch seam, which is the inseam, we'll fold once and then fold again. And then we'll put that under the machine. And we will check our marks. We'll fold on the one line to encase the raw edge, and we'll fold again to make the hem. And we'll follow that 1/2 inch. Feel for that, make sure it feels about right. And again, as we approach that side seam, we want to make sure that's lined up. If you find that your stitch length is a little bit wavy or your seam allowance on the inside isn't quite caught or it's a little bit off, don't be afraid to take that apart and redo it. You may need to practice a couple of times, but once you get the feel for it, it should work pretty smoothly. So now that our hems are stitched back together, we'll take it over to the board and give it a quick press. So to press the hems, we're going to turn them right side out. And we'll just use the steam and weight of the iron to kind of press that flat. Get rid of any of the chalk marks that are left behind. And then we can kind of, because these are stretchy, you can kind of manipulate them a little bit to get them to lay nice and flat. If you look at the difference between the outside and the inside of the fabric, you can see the outside is twice as thick because we used 2 threads, but it just represents a jean thread a little bit better than it would be if you would use 1 thread. Stitching from the top down might be a little tricky at first, but once you master it, it's a nice technique to get this hem stitching looking like the stitching on the rest of the pants. For more information and courses, including downloadable PDFs, visit our website at tailoryourself.com. And always remember, measure twice, cut once. Thanks for watching.